Well, a ceasefire implies no arrangement, simply what you hear, a ceasefire. Everybody stops shooting at each other, and that means that there are no restrictions on what either side can do. That means that in addition to evacuating wounded, you can also bring in new forces, new equipment, new capabilities. Ceasefire is just that. We all agree that at such and such a time, we will stop fighting each other. How long will that last? As long as both sides are willing to do it. There is nothing permanent about it. There is nothing that contributes necessarily to a peace agreement, which is ultimately what at least President Trump says he wants, right, and is what President Putin wants. You can continue to fight and still negotiate a peace treaty. Now, people think that's unusual. No, it isn't at all. That's happened many, many times in many, many wars where people said, fine, let's talk while we're fighting. Right. And obviously, whenever the fighting stops, wherever we are, based on the peace arrangements that we've made, we'll abide by those. But right now, until there is an agreement that stipulates certain conditions, where will the border run, who is in charge, and so forth, we'll continue to fight. There's nothing wrong with that. That makes great sense, and that is the standard operation, if you will, in European history. Not, oh, let's have a ceasefire. Remember that the Germans negotiated with the Allies long before they had a ceasefire on 11 November. The ceasefire that occurs at 11 o'clock on 11 November in 1918 is a result of a peace agreement. Well, my information suggests that the Ukrainians want an end to the war, overwhelmingly. I also am getting a lot of information that suggests that they would like to be rid of Mr. Zelensky. He is by no means popular at all. I mean, he sent 1.8 million Ukrainian soldiers to their deaths in a war that shouldn't have been fought and could never be won. So how popular can the man be? True. It's got the secret police all over the country trying to sort of press people into military service. Right. And you've got housewives, mothers, daughters, sons, everybody's coming out to protect dad or their brother or something else and get rid of the secret police. So I think the issue for Ukraine right now is we want an end to this. And if we have to give up something, then we're prepared to do it because we must have an end to this terrible war. The other thing is that I'm sure the Ukrainians have been brainwashed into believing that everything on that map was granted to them in perpetuity. We all know the circumstances under which that crazy map was drawn when it was drawn. It's not consistent with history, with culture, with ethnicity, with language, or anything. And I think there are older Ukrainians that know that. But the bottom line is that I think the Ukrainians just want an end to it. Now, the Europeans, if I were a German watching this, I would be disgusted beyond belief. What are we doing? Merz looks like a child in kindergarten asking for permission to speak. Right. He speaks, he says something that Trump doesn't agree with, and he's essentially told, thank you for your interest in the conversation, go back to sleep. If you look at Georgia Maloney, I always get a charge out of her because she's always rolling her eyes and leaning to one side, like, what am I doing here? What's the purpose of this whole thing? Well, Georgia is the one with some common sense. She wants to get out of the European Union. Well, the European Union has turned out to be a tyranny. Everybody hates the damn thing because it's not satisfied with organizing trade across borders. They want to dictate what everybody's going to do in all of their schools, how they're going to live, what their so-called values are supposed to be. So the EU is a catastrophe. That's going to go away before NATO does, and then NATO will follow suit. The whole thing, in my judgment, marks the end of U.S. hegemony in Europe, the end of European subordination, if you will, to U.S. national leadership. Now, I'm sure that's not what President Trump wanted, or it's what he thinks, but that's really what it is. And I think most of the people in that room will be swept away in the near future in elections by new people that are going to come in and say, that's it, we've got to decide our own future. Who's going to determine the destiny of Germany, of Poland, of France, of Italy? It's got to be the people that live in those countries. The other thing is, this is something nobody here seems to understand. The people that have the most at stake right now weren't even represented at the table. Who are the people that border Ukraine? Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Moldova, Romania. Where were they? What difference does it make what they decide in Washington or what the French, the Germans, the British decide, what do the people that border Ukraine want? And that's where the focus ought to be. It should be Moscow with the people I just described. The only exception I would make is Germany, because the Germans have a long, long history in the region. It goes back 1,000 years. Right. So there's a legitimate place for them. As for the rest, forget it. They have nothing to say. Let them go. Now, if you want to drag in the Finns, you can. And I think you have a Finnish government that is totally delusional, that thinks it's threatened by Russia when it is not. So you can bring them in, but they have nothing to do with Ukraine. Mm. So I think we got to go back to the core states I just mentioned, plus Berlin. They've got to sit with Moscow. Now, we can support that. President Trump can stand up and say, I'm willing to support this, and I wish everybody well. We'll assist in whatever way we can, but otherwise, what have we got to do with it? Right. We're one of the people that started this war. In fact, we're mightily responsible for it. It'll end as soon as President Trump says, that's it, I'm out, which is exactly what he should have said already. Right. But I suppose he'll wait until Zelensky backstabs him and comes out publicly and says, I'm not going to agree to anything that you say. At which point in time, President Trump may finally wash his hands of him. You realize I think the EU and NATO will both go out of existence over the next year. I see no future for either of those organizations. Okay. For the reasons I've already cited. Yeah. I mean, Poles, they collectively despise the European Union. The Germans, who are usually blamed for the power and the influence of the European Union, are increasingly fed up with the European Union. The Italians want out. The Greeks would leave tomorrow morning. I mean, we just go down the list. Who are the people that are backing this stuff? It's the ones in the far west.
Nima, you're going to go gray trying to imagine rational thinking with Donald Trump's Ukraine policy. It's impossible. It's a mission impossible. Donald Trump, this isn't about national security policy. This isn't about foreign policy. This is about domestic policy. Donald Trump is trying to appease a domestic audience and several domestic audiences at the same time. He has his base who says they're tired of American money being sent off to fund Ukraine. And then he has his political opposition, or what I would say the traitors among us, those who claim to be supportive of Donald Trump, but who actually vehemently oppose any policy that would bring an end to this conflict on terms acceptable to the Russian Federation. And so he has to go through, these very complicated machinations. He doesn't care about the dead because he doesn't know how to count the dead. He just repeats numbers that are given to him by people. If he cared about the dead, then he truly wanted to know what the reality is and understand why reality matters. He lives in a fantasy land where Russia is losing more manpower than Ukraine, where the Ukrainians are losing manpower at a sustainable rate, meaning that Ukraine has the potential of continuing this conflict. Russia, according to his numbers, is not able to sustain this. Therefore, the concept of continuing this war to put pressure on Russia seems to make sense to him. But the fact of the matter is we now know that 1.7 million Ukrainians are dead or missing. I think there's a couple 100,000 of those who could be missing, but they're probably dead. That number is going to go up because if, according to the same leaked data out of the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, 625,000 of those dead / missing are this year alone. That's 90,000 a month. And that number is going up higher because Russia's just dominating. So this means that every month, another 90, soon to be 100,000 Ukrainians are dying or disappearing. Those are big numbers. If Trump cared about Ukraine, he'd say we have to bring this war to an end because those numbers are only going to get worse. Russia's numbers are big, but not that big. Right now it's estimated that, Russia's losing, one dead for every 10, 13, 15 Ukrainian dead. So, the Russian numbers are far less than the Ukrainian numbers. Still big numbers. I mean, I'm not saying Russia's having a cakewalk here. This is hard fighting. This is some of the most high intense combat It's been seen since the Second World War. At least Donald Trump gets that aspect of it right. And he's starting to understand that it's a new kind of war. He spoke the other day about drone warfare and the reality of drone warfare. But, he can't allow himself to be painted into a corner, meaning that he caved into Russia. So he has to say stupid things and do stupid things. This is why the other day he posted on social media about Ukraine had the ability to attack Russia. Nobody ever won a war on the defense. You have to have the ability to attack. He coupled that then with an announcement that the United States, it was reported in the Wall Street Journal, is going to sell 3,000 some odd extended range, attack missiles, or I don't know what the A stands for, to Ukraine. And on the surface of it, you say, well, what? Because wasn't it Donald Trump who realized back in December of 2024 that the Biden administration's green lighting of use of ATACMS missiles for targeting the Russian strategic, that brought us to the brink of nuclear war? Trump recognized that. That's why he said, I won't continue that policy. Now he's doing that policy, just using a different weapon system. But let's parse this out, because that's what he said. He's posturing right now so that nobody can say, you're not supporting Ukraine. He said, no, we're just not paying for it. But NATO's paying for it. Remember those 10 Patriot batteries that they were going to provide? The full complement. I mean, I love that term, the full complement. It's so wholesome. It makes you feel really good and safe and secure. And now I guess we're providing with the full complement of ERAM missiles too. But those Patriot batteries will never be delivered to Ukraine. First of all, they have to be produced. You have to get in line. There's a lot of people looking for Patriot batteries and Patriot missiles. Israel used a whole bunch of them, needs replacements. The United States doesn't have any left. We need to beef up our forces. So once we start producing them and we get them to Europe so they can transfer them to Ukraine, we're talking 2027, 2028. There won't be a Ukraine by then. It's not going to last much longer. The ERAM, it was a system conceived in 2023. It didn't exist. In fact, it doesn't exist. I mean, they've spent 2 years developing it. I think it might have passed its last trial, but it's not in serial production yet. That means that if you're building it, you're building one-ofs for testing purposes. They're not designed to be given to Ukraine yet. And yet in 6 weeks, Donald Trump says he'll begin delivery. That means that let's assume, to make that announcement, the system now has passed its final evaluation. The maximum output that the United States will have with everything going full speed is 1,000 missiles a year. That means that to get to what Donald Trump is, we're talking at least 3.5 years down the road before that full complement gets there. But some missiles may be delivered, a handful, a dozen, starting. But then there's the fine print. Ukraine can't use these missiles without America's permission. Only America gets to designate the targets. And if you think Donald Trump is going to allow the United States to designate targets for the ERAM missiles, knowing that in doing so, you close the door on any peace possibility because you become a direct participant in the war, that isn't going to happen. Everything gets pushed off 6 months. I think Donald Trump is hoping that in 6 months, there will be a new reality on the ground, one that compels the Ukrainians to accept the Russian terms without compromise that can bring this war to an end. Otherwise, this war will continue until Russia accomplishes all of its objectives. And unfortunately, to get those objectives, Russia will be called upon to destroy the Ukrainian army. There's 800,000 of them in there today. I think Russia, by the time this is finished, will end up killing another 250,000, 300,000 Ukrainians. That's just the way this cookie crumbles. That's the way war goes. So, this is the reality. Donald Trump is saying things, but the reality is nothing of substance is going to be delivered. Donald Trump has bigger fish in mind. He has a strategic nuclear treaty he's trying to revive with the Russians. He's trying to come up with, profitable joint enterprises, joint exploration of the Arctic. I think it was Chevron just basically was greenlit to go back into the Russian oil business. Trump said, yeah, we're friendly to that. That's, billions of dollars. And after Chevron will come other American energy giants that'll get back into the Russian market. this is what Donald Trump cares about. He doesn't care about Ukraine. In fact, today, or I think yesterday, he said, you know, what did Ukraine expect going to war with Russia? They got their butts kicked. He recognizes that reality. It's just a political game that's being played right now because there's a tremendous amount of opposition inside the United States, in Europe, and colluding between Europe and the United States to prevent Donald Trump from having better relations with Russia. And unfortunately, these people who oppose better relations with Russia are willing to sacrifice Ukraine to achieve, you know, their outcome. And when I say sacrifice, I mean literally sacrifice Ukraine. They're destroying the genetic pool of Ukraine. Soon they'll be sending 18-year-olds to the front line. And when they do that, that's it. Ukraine's finished as a race because you'll have a bunch of women and you won't have any men left. And that's it. I mean, the Europeans and the establishment of the United States believe they're going to be the ones making a decision, but they're not. The only person making a decision is Russia. Russia's in complete control of this narrative here. Russia's not budging. Russia offers cosmetic compromises, but also Russia understands that even the cosmetic compromises they're putting on the table, Ukraine won't accept. And, you know, so now Russia, look at Steve Witkoff saying, you know, Russia has made concessions. Russia's ready to concede. Russia's ready to work with us. Ukraine's not. But he views that as a positive because the Russians are making concessions. So, you know, at the end of the day, it's not going to be the Russians that are going to be called upon to make dramatic. It's going to be the Ukrainians who will be called upon to accept unconditional surrender. And right now, Zelensky is incapable of agreeing to this, which means this conflict will continue. Every day this goes on, it gets worse and worse and worse for the Ukrainians. There's no good news coming out of Ukraine. None.